Just finished a message from Numbers 12 on 3 siblings that were used by God in a powerful way to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, and yet they struggled with 3 different qualities. Miriam started being a little bit mouthy. She was not letting the words of her heart, the meditation of her heart, be pleasing in God's sight, and began to be mouthy towards Moses. Arrogant Aaron was her brother, both older than Moses, began to speak against Moses.
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Monday, February 6th, 2023. And last week, Jinger Duggar Volo's brand new book came out, Becoming Free Indeed, which she dissects and sort of demolishes the theology that she grew up under, which is the IBLP. And in her book, she shared a lot of different stories about the rules of the Gothard houses, the superstition she grew up in, and a lot of the controlling rules that were in place, and the performative aspect of her life, which she felt was detrimental because she was never able to be authentic and really learn how to be around people and establish good relationships. She said she grew up in fear of making the wrong mistakes because of the tightrope that Mr. Gothard put her on of this, if you don't do this, this drastic, awful, disastrous thing will happen. And that's a very scary place to live if you're a kid. So obviously, when Jinger Duggar decided to come out against her parents' theology, I told you that there was probably going to be some upset coming down the pike. And we might start seeing it not directly from the Duggars, because I said I don't see the Duggars saying anything about this publicly because they're going to probably use their friends to send messages. And it was within a day that the messages started flooding out online. And I started noticing that some of the biggest Duggar supporters or members of the IBLP started publishing sermons that were directly attacking Jinger. And it put this all into perspective that Jim, Bob, and Michelle, who also had a pastor at their church last night, basically talk about the prodigal son and essentially say that if you just can't get over something, you're just stuck, and that's why you're depressed. Basically, like, Jinger, you have no right to be upset because you could just be not upset by getting over it.
You have been so discouraged. You have had an unfulfilled expectation that you believe you've been done wrong. Bitterness is the unresolved violation of your justice system.
Yeah, that's what's happening in Duggartown. And that was followed up by Jeremy posting a video of a song, a Christian song, where they basically said they were moving on and letting go and walking away. So, and Jinger also revealed in a video basically who she talks to, and who she's not talking to is pretty telling.
The same as well. I'm hopeful that many of my family members will read this book, and I know that a lot of them are still in the system. A lot have kind of walked away from it. I want this just to be helpful to whoever reads it, because I think it's so many more people than we know have been affected by damaging teaching where...
So let's dive into today's topic. Before we do, can you please do me a big favor and give this video a thumbs up? Also subscribe to my channel if you've not yet subscribed by clicking on the subscribe button down there. Make sure to click on the bell so you get notified of any time new content loads, and make sure to leave a comment if you have something to say. And as always, share this video with your friends. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was this video I saw where it's a sermon that Gil Bates made on his Bible Church web YouTube channel. So a lot of people misunderstand the Bates. They think that the Bates are this way better family because they appeared more polished and had less scandal publicly than the Duggars, and so therefore they must be better because they let their daughters go to college and wear pants, even though they didn't really let their daughters wear pants. And the colleges that their daughters went to were through Crown College, which is owned by the IBLP, and the working that they do is still done from home, and they can work as long as they can work from home, kind of thing. But people have been fooled by the Bates believing they're better than the Duggars because they somehow think that they're not a part of this group, even though they are. So Gil Bates is the actual vice chair of the Institute in Basic Life Principles. That's right. He serves as one of 3 board members of this organization. And in the year 2020, they actually said that he was paid $3,000. I don't know if that is just for like reimbursement or what, but he has an income from their $990 through their nonprofit that says that he took home an income of $3,000, which isn't a lot, but still, he's a board member and has been a board member since I believe 2012 or 2014. So Gil Bates is leading this group that Jinger says is horrible to women and has really instilled horrible fears into people and based on superstition. And she also called out the performative nature of the IBLP and how everyone is worried about their outward performance and not really the true heart of who they are. So I was watching Gil Bates last Wednesday. He did a sermon on his YouTube channel for his church, and this is what he said.
I'm glad our eternity is not dependent on our performance. It's not dependent on you being good enough, because you can't be good enough. It's dependent on Christ. Was his sacrifice on Calvary enough? His order, he said, Christ is the head of the man. The man is the head of the woman. The parents are the head over the children. You can write it any way you want to, but that's the way it's supposed to be. And if you don't like that, and I don't like that, I'm going to have a house divided. Because everybody has good opinions. But God gave everybody different roles. Different roles in life. And if you don't get in your role, you get in somebody else's role, you're going to have problems. If the children think they can tell the parents what is right, then they're outside of God's design. If the wife thinks she can always correct the husband, she's got the wrong design. If the husband thinks he doesn't love his wife like Christ loved the church, he's got the wrong design. God's got the perfect design. He's never made a mistake. But if we don't line up according to his, we're going to have division. And division brings destruction. He said, I'm telling you, I beseech you. This is important. I'm begging you.
First off, I want to apologize to those of you that watched the Bates show and believed that Gil Bates was this like more progressive version of like the IBLP and thought that he had this like loving, caring nature for children and women. Because if you spend any length of time watching his Bible Baptist East of East Tennessee YouTube channel, you see a man that is very, very patriarchal, very misogynistic, and he will make comments that are completely, oh my goodness, he can go to racist places. He can discuss like laughing and joking about hitting his kids. And I mean, in this specific component, he is telling people like, how dare you question the umbrella of authority, because this is the design, regardless of if it's in this or if it's in this. And if a wife criticizes her husband or corrects him, can you imagine living in a world where your husband told you that you can't correct them, and that if you do correct them, it's going to be out of design and you're going to have division and destruction? That's the kind of fear that Jinger is talking about when she talks about Duggar. When she talks about Gothard, she's talking about how they tell kids and people that if you step out of line, there will be destruction, there will be death, there will be fear, there will be horrible things that happen to you. And he just said it. If you don't follow design, there will be destruction. In what destruction? What destruction happens, Gil? I would love to know, what is the destruction where a woman actually has a voice and speaks her voice and corrects her husband? If my husband is acting a fool and acting really inappropriately and saying horrible things to people, why shouldn't I speak up and say something? Or if my husband is not acting correctly, or if I have an expectation, why wouldn't I want to say something? He's defending this group, and he has to remind them that anything that you're hearing on the outside is just, they don't know. And these kinds of messages permeated, because then David Waller posted this over on his church, Fair Park Baptist. So you have Mr. Gil Bates, who is the board member of the IBLP, and then you have Gothard's former assistant posting this.
Just finished a message from Numbers 12 on 3 siblings that were used by God in a powerful way to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, and yet they struggled with 3 different qualities. Miriam started being a little bit mouthy. She was not letting the words of her heart, the meditation of her heart, be pleasing in God's sight, and began to be mouthy towards Moses. Arrogant Aaron was her brother, both older than Moses, began to speak against Moses, and in so doing, they ended up participating in the murmuring of the children of Israel, which kept the entire generation of the children of Israel out of the promised land and made them wander in the desert for 40 years. Third and finally, Moses was meek, more meek than any other man on the face of the earth, and it was through Moses' meek leadership that the nation of Israel was brought out of Egypt and brought into the promised land. May God bless you and I to be the meek.
I just want to mention something that Moses apparently never made it out and never got to Israel, because someone in my comments was like, he's not even telling the right story. Moses passed away before he even got there. So he had his eyes set on the promised land, but he hadn't gotten there yet. So he's not even telling the story correctly. And I was like, well, that's the IBLP. But anyways, David is basically saying mouthy Martha, or whatever the name was, had the audacity to speak up and speak out and say things, and arrogant Aaron spoke against Moses. So my analogy, and Gothard uses analogies, that's his favorite thing, is that, or metaphor would be that he's claiming that Moses or Gothard are leading people out of Egypt and into Israel. And if you are mouthy and arrogant, you're just going to lead people wandering. And so don't be like these two, be like Moses, be like Gothard. You know, the one thing that this group loves to do is try to silence and make it seem like any sort of truth is actually slander and is actually false. And so if you speak your truth and you speak in opposition, or if you ask questions, or you bring up things that are relevant, that are critical to what they do, they will literally act like you're being mouthy. So their world exists, what we say goes, and everything else is wrong. This is a group that teaches that slander is using the truth to hurt people. Slander is not using the truth to hurt people. Slander is spreading a lie. Slander in this world, they teach people, is using the truth to hurt people and to gossip. They've already conditioned people to believe that if you tell the truth, you're labeled a slanderer when you're not really slandering. It's not slander to tell the truth. So Gothard has his bestie, David Waller, biggest cheerleader, and David actually really loves Josh as well. And then last night at the Duggar's church, they had a guest pastor who apparently is kind of known in the IFB. I've never seen this guy before. I found his entire sermon really harmful, because it was basically telling people not to go to the doctor. And I was like, pastors are great and wonderful for spiritual health, but when they start making recommendations for how to manage your health when they're not a doctor, can be so life-threatening for people. So I was like, oh my gosh. But then when he started talking about the prodigal son, he went on to this long tangent about how if you have expectations, that's actually what produces depression. And this is what he said.
You have been so discouraged. You have had an unfulfilled expectation that you believe you've been done wrong. Bitterness is the unresolved violation of your justice system. Something has happened in your life from God or man that you know to be wrong, and you can't change it or move on from it. You just can't resolve it, and you are stuck in that unresolved violation of your justice system, otherwise known as bitterness. Life hasn't been fair, and you won't move on. They were grieved. David has had it. 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6 says that all the people was grieved. Grieved is the Hebrew word mara, or bitter. Everyone thought what was happening to them was wrong and not what they expected should have happened. So here we go. We got to get done.
So for how many years? 20 years now since Josh Duggar did those horrible things to his sisters. That horrible, unspeakable acts he committed against his sisters. And the fact that the sisters have separated themselves from the family, at least some of them, and are speaking out about the system that they grew up in and how oppressive it was for them and how it protected people like Josh, and how they're finally glad that the justice system has justice has been served. The response at the church, no, this is the Duggars church, and I want to explain this. This church was a very small church. This is the church the Duggars flew to after he had a huge falling out with Paul Caldwell. And this church, their whole membership base and all of the tithing and every success they have right now is because of the Duggars. And they brought in all of their friends with them. And so they've grown this church exponentially and made them a very healthy church through the Duggars. And so Jim has these pastors putting out content like this, basically saying, well, you're just bitter and that's why you're depressed and you're not letting go of something because you just can't get over it. Your bitterness is the favorite word that they like to say when you have an expectation that goes unmet, because women in the IBLP are not supposed to have any expectations for anything that their husbands do. So if the only reason you would be upset with your husband is because of an unmet expectation. So in this case, the only reason Jinger has criticism for her parents is because she had an unmet expectation about her childhood, that somehow she was supposed to be raised and like nurtured and cared for by parents who would protect her from her brother and not raise her in a prison of fear. This book might not be directly speaking out against her parents, but I actually spoke to a friend of the Jim Bob's who isn't friends with him anymore. But, you know, he was saying that like Jinger can never speak out against her parents because she's still probably very indoctrinated to believe that negatively speaking about your parents is disobedience. And so instead of being negative, she'll be very like, you know, we're going to agree to disagree. Or, you know, she has danced around the topic of, do your parents support the book? They clearly don't. And she said as much in that, you know, this is her story and she told them she was going to put it out regardless. And they can say what they want and let them have their story. Jinger has a right after all of these years to speak her truth and say, like, the IBLP protected my brother, the IBLP protected Gothard, the IBLP created a lot of fear in my life. And the Duggars' response is to have all of their friends put out videos to slander, discredit, and call out what she's been reporting about, but ignoring all of the other things. Like, how dare she be bitter? Like, she has no right to be bitter about what happened to her as a child. She has no right to speak about it, because in their world, you just have to move on. You don't get to like feel bad about something. You had an expectation that your parents were going to raise you without fear. You had an expectation that your brother wasn't going to abuse you. So the way that the friend said is that this is how the Duggars are responding. They're doing it through their pastors. And he said, like, you will see other people like from the IBLP and from their circles start posting things. And he said, expect the Bates to do stuff. Expect, you know, David Waller. And I started looking for all of this stuff and I was like, oh my gosh, here it is, here it is, here it is. And, you know, he said that the Duggars' perpetuation of the abuse of their daughters and continuing to protect Josh while not protecting their daughters continues. And it's just the continuation of the girls being discounted and discarded and not protected. So the girls don't have an opportunity or a right to speak out and say, I don't agree with what I was raised in. And the Duggars have their friends saying, you're just bitter, get over it, and you better not correct your husband. And this is the authority and parents have the right to tell you what to do, says Gil Bates. And David Waller implying she's a mouthy woman that's arrogant to say how she feels. It's pretty sick and twisted. And Jeremy and Jinger have been posting, you know, they had caviar and steak and they've been celebrating, which is wonderful. But I can't help but think how hard this must be to know that this is what was going to happen. She still put the book out, and this is how they're responding. But to me, it just shows the character of who these people are. Loving parents don't respond this way. They don't sick their friends on their daughter. Jinger had a right to speak her truth. She had a right to share her story. They exploited Jinger for how many years and made her work for basically next to nothing. And now she can speak that she doesn't believe in what they told and wants to correct a book that they put in her name. And that's how they retaliate. Such Christians, aren't they? Are you surprised or not surprised? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.